Welcome to Pitching for Publicity. I am Linda Fitzgerald, and I'm hosting this webinar for Megan. We're so glad you're here. This is the Shasta-Cascade Small Business Development Center. The information provided in this webinar and any supplementary materials provided to registrants are intended for educational and informational purposes only and does not constitute professional, financial, or legal advice. No registrant should act or fail to act on the basis of any material contained in this webinar without obtaining proper financial, legal, or other professional advice specific to their situation. The Northern California Small Business Development Center and its host, the HSU-sponsored Programs Foundation, specifically disclaims any liability, loss, or risk, professional or otherwise, which is incurred as a consequence directly or indirectly of the use and application of any of the information presented in this webinar. And this is the Shasta-Cascade Small Business Development Center. We're located in far Northern California in Shasta and Trinity counties. This is a nonprofit organization, and we provide confidential, no-cost advisory and training services for small businesses. The reason it's no cost is because your tax dollars have already paid for this. We are sponsored by the SBA and the HSU-sponsored Programs Foundation. And now I'll hand it off to Megan.
All right. Hey, everyone. Welcome. Excited to have you guys on the webinar today. So we're scheduled for a full 2 hours, but I know last time we did this, we came in under. So we will get through this and hopefully have plenty of time for questions at the end. So I am a marketing professional. My clients have been featured in a number of places. You can see a few logos that I'm sure you recognize here, QVC, Allure, ABC News, Cosmopolitan, to name a few. And so today we are going to be talking about pitching for publicity. So we'll go through a few key points in pitching successfully. First off, most importantly, where should you pitch to? That's the first question you have to ask in pitching, is what media outlets are you going to send your information to? Second, I call it pitching like a human. So how are we going to craft your pitch, creating your media kit, and understanding press releases so that you can come off genuine and like yourself? And, you know, some of these media outlets are getting bombarded with crazy people, crazy amounts of people. And so how can you stand out and seem genuine and not salesy? Then the next thing we will talk about is reverse publicity. So this is actually using your own channels and featuring other people to get publicity through what I call reverse publicity. So getting their audience onto your platforms. And then we'll wrap up. So the objective of today is, by the end of this course, you should be able to go out and get free exposure for your business through blogs, podcasts, social medias, and we'll briefly touch on local news and magazines as well. So before we begin, I am going to give you guys an opportunity to introduce yourself. If you would like to either unmute yourself or raise your hand. Actually, we have a handful of people. If you can raise your hand, if you would like to introduce yourself via the microphone, or you can also put it in the chat. Now, something to note, our chat is set up so it's not going to everyone. So if you could send things directly to me, that is typically the easiest way to get your question answered and for me to be able to see it versus Linda, who will only be popping in on our question slides. So again, you can either raise your hand to introduce yourself, or you can chat me an introduction of who you are, what your business or business idea is, and your reason for being here today. We have Sandra Sample. She's a realtor from San Jose. Welcome, Sandra. I'll give you a few more seconds for anyone else who wants to introduce yourself. The reason we ask this too is so that I can fold examples in to these webinars that are hopefully more relevant to you. So I have Suzanne, who has a business called Petite La Fleur. She sells confections, sweets, and snacks in the East Bay.
Hi, my name is Detricia Younger. I am the principal CEO, CMO of Detricia Younger LLC. It's a marketing and business consultancy. And for myself, I'm here because I have about 15 years of corporate experience, but I have transitioned into the role of solopreneur. So it's how do I take those years of experience and properly translate that in order to acquire new business for myself that's very much going to be based on relationships and credibility when my personal brand has been, so tied into being an employee. And now I'm an owner operator.
Awesome. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Onya Hanotu, founder and winemaker at Ikanga Wines. I'm introducing new types of wines to the US market. I think it's really exciting. And I'm here to figure out how I can help bring awareness to what I'm doing. Thank you, Megan.
I think that's very exciting as well. Everyone loves wine. Well, maybe not everyone, but I love wine. So welcome. All right, well, we're going to go ahead and dive in then. All right, so starting off, where should you pitch for publicity? Where should you pitch? It depends on your target audience. So this is super important to note. We do not want to go around pitching to anyone and everyone trying to get our information everywhere. Reason being, one, it's going to be a waste of your time. Your time is so precious and valuable. And so we want to make sure that where you're spending your efforts to get pitches in are actually places that are going to be considering your content. Second, even if you were to get picked up by, let's take the wine business, for example, if you pitch to a blog about frogs, they might say, okay, well, I like wine, so I'll put it on there. But people coming to that website are not coming to that website for information about wine, they're coming for information about frogs. So the likelihood of an ROI or people converting from that blog post or whatever it may be is relatively low compared to if we are getting featured in something specific to wine tasting, etc. So the first thing you want to do in this process is your research. So first, some of the things that you want to note. Now, I am going to be sending out a worksheet that I like to use for this research. But one of the things that we look for are what social media accounts are they following? What blogs do they read? What podcasts do they listen to? And when I say they, I'm talking about your target audience. So where is your target audience getting their information? So again, social media accounts, blogs, podcasts, what coaches are they following or are they engaging with? What events are they attending? What conferences? What magazines do they like? What social media groups are you in? And when I say go social media groups, talking about Facebook groups and LinkedIn groups. So this is the best thing you can use for your time and to make sure that you are really targeting the spaces that you know your audiences are at, because publicity can be amazing and actually turning into real life sales. For local companies, a few other places that you will want to look at are your local newspapers and local news outlets. For a national company, you would of course want to look at your national news outlets as well. And then are there any local magazines? Like here in Redding, California, we have a local Enjoy magazine that can be a great fit for pitching for local Redding people. And almost every little small community or large community has local magazines that your product or service might be a good fit for. Then another place that kind of gets slept on is your local email newsletters. So I know with a lot of local chambers, part of your chamber membership can be plugging yourself in their actual newsletter. If there's any other companies that are congruent with you and what you're doing, you can partner up with other local companies to get plugged in. So for example, the Sweet Shop Well, maybe you want to do a feature with this wine company, and you might reach out to your friend from across the street that has the wine tasting and say, hey, what if we put on a wine and sweets event and paired our wine with our sweets? So utilizing creative things like that so that you can then get onto the other company's email list, newsletter, website, and utilize their audience to further your reach. So I want to show you real quick, and I have it pulled up right here. This is what this worksheet looks like, which we will get emailed to after the fact. But it is your customer identification targeting. So what you want to think about is who is your ideal customer, who is most likely to buy your product, and then go through these thought practices. So which social media sites do they use in general? So are they on Facebook? Are they on Instagram? Who are their influencers in their space? So that's who are they following on social media? And again, this is repetitive of what I just went over, but I wanted to go over just a brief and quick example. If you go into LinkedIn, for example, and I'll just pull it up for the sake of pulling things up. Let's say target audience is, let's see, this Lori McNeil gal. Some great things that you can see are, if we scroll down, you can see her activities, you can see her followers, her experience, her education. But then down here, and this is where we want to look at, particularly for LinkedIn, we can see her interests. And so we can begin to build a list of things that our target audience, say this gal is my target audience. We can begin to see, okay, what is she actually interested in? And then we go to another person and another person, and we begin to get a list of things that we keep seeing happening or showing up over and over again. So you might see that a lot of people in your target audience are following maybe this impact entrepreneur. So that's something to note and think about. Okay, does impact entrepreneur have a blog? Do they have a podcast? If so, that's going to be a place that we definitely want to note in our customer research. So you can get a lot of this information from people's public social media accounts, LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook are all great ones. Facebook and LinkedIn in particular make that super transparent, the things that they're engaging in and looking at. And then the other thing is just simple Google searches. So thinking, let's see, top blogs in, I was trying to remember what another one of these businesses were. So I'm going to use wine as an example again. So you can see right here, you get a list of top wine blogs for wine lovers. There's a handful of lists, and you'll begin to see different things that are popping up consistently across these lists and populating them into this outlet. Same kind of Google search can be done for what associations are your target audience are part of, what conferences do they attend. Maybe for wine, we're focusing on moms. I don't know that moms would be associated with an association, but maybe top podcasts for moms. And there you go. We have a list of podcasts now that we might consider pitching if we're looking at really targeting moms. So I just wanted to walk through kind of that exercise, because that's something I really encourage you before you go and pitch to anyone. Grab this worksheet, which again will be emailed to you, and go through Google, go through people you know that are in your target audience, and look for where they're following, where they're engaging, and where they're receiving their media. Now, something to note on where you should pitch for publicity after you've done this research and really during it. I like to encourage you, do not be afraid to swing for the fences. So if there is a podcast, a blog, a magazine, a news outlet that you think, oh my gosh, there's no way they're going to feature me, there's no way they're going to feature my story, don't be so shy, because you really never know. Some of these PR opportunities, as particularly with blogs and podcasts and those kind of things, you are really giving them content. So you're helping them do their job. That's why you see a lot of people getting featured in Forbes and stuff like that. And it's because they are giving them content. Forbes needs a ton of content. So if your content is good, it's great for their target audience. The likelihood of you being able to find a feature in one of those name brand places is actually a lot higher than what you might think. So, so I just like to specify that. So don't be afraid to dream big. Think about the biggest places that you would want to be featured in. The next thing you want to do that is so high value is to join your relevant Facebook and LinkedIn groups. So if you are a business consultant, that looks like joining groups for the particular target that you're looking into. So say you are a business consultant specific to inclusivity and equity. There are a ton of groups out there for HR managers or whoever would be the decision makers for that particular thing and people that are interested in that particular topic. So that would be a great example of something to go and make sure you're and join those groups and start seeing who's showing up in those groups, who's running those groups, what other influencers are in those groups. A lot of those groups too, particularly around the business world, but really almost anything. You'll see on occasion something pop up like, hey, I have a podcast. I'm looking for someone who can speak to X, Y, and Z. And so that's a really high value and why I encourage to find as many active groups that are on your particular subject. And sometimes you can even find really specified groups where it might be people who blog about wine and the whole group is bloggers. And then you can get a lot of a request for features popping up. The next thing I encourage you to do is to find 3 or 5 other potential places to pitch off of each place on your list. So what that means is when you go and find an outlet. So let's say that it is, we'll just go with Forbes because it's easy. When you find Forbes, I want you to take that and from Forbes, look at the other places that are like Forbes that your target audience is, sorry, I'm not saying this correctly. So when you find another place, probably because Forbes is a really bad example, let's say you go with like a mom and pop blog. Look at the other people, or a podcast is a better example. Look at the other guests who have been on that podcast and then start looking at those guests and who their target audience is, what their reach is, and those kind of things. And you can actually identify, when you identify somewhere that you want to reach out to, looking at who has been a guest blog, who has been a guest speaker, who has been a guest podcaster, who has had information shared. Sometimes you'll find that those people are also very high value and are people who also have their own platforms, hence why they're pitching, that you might be able to pitch to as well. And then a word for warning, and then we'll take questions. I encourage people, do not scoff at people with smaller followings. So we've talked about the big brands, go swing for the fences, but at the same time, there is this way sweet spot with 3,000 to 8,000 followers approximately. And that's Instagram followers, though it applies for, so LinkedIn would be a different number. But there's a sweet spot that they're not huge influencers, they're not named brands, but at those lower thousands numbers, they still have really genuine and really engaged followings. So look at their engagement, see how many people are commenting every time they post, see how many likes they're getting. And you might find that while they have a lower following, they have a very engaged and very loyal following. So I encourage you, look at those smaller followings, those smaller podcasts, even though you might think, oh, they're not name brand, they're not going to be worth my time. They often have followings that are super loyal. So we'll find this with product-based businesses when we do influencer outreach. We'll send a product to someone with 200,000 and we might get a handful of sales, but often we'll get more sales from the 5,000 followers just because of how engaged and how loyal those followers are. I've been talking for a long time, so I'm gonna stop real quick and take some questions. So again, you can chat those directly to me. Let's see, I have one in the chat now. Are there free or low-cost automated scrapers to grab this info from publicly available information? I am not familiar with any scrapers of that nature. I also, again, shy away from that only because like I get marketing emails all day and a lot of people do. So all kinds of people, we have a blog at Startup Reading, which is the organization I work with. I get probably a feature every day, and it's clear that it's canned. It's clear that they have scraped the information from somewhere on the internet, and I ignore all of them because 99.9% of them are not even looking at what my blog is worth. They're just trying to outsource the system, and they're not very successful. You don't get a lot of ROI. Actually, if you look at my LinkedIn messaging, I hired a company to do some LinkedIn outreach for me back when I was a consultant, and I did not get one actual lead from them because that's exactly what they did. It was not personal. They scraped every LinkedIn profile that was potentially in my target audience, and it just was not. There was no ROI. There was no ROI at all. And so that's why I encourage to do the work yourself. Make sure that you are getting high quality leads and that and we'll get into this in pitching like a human, that we are taking the time to send human messages that are thought out for that particular platform. You are going to have a way higher success rate that way. So I'm sure there's information and things you can find online, and maybe you might want to start there, but I encourage you to do some of this work by hand on your own. And you're going to have a higher success rate, or to have a virtual assistant to do some of this work. We have another question. Where would we search for our podcast niche, like an actual podcast platform like Apple, Google, LinkedIn? Google is the easiest way to search for podcasts, but you can also search inside of Apple itself. But I just like Google because you can say top podcast for blank. Top podcast for fashion, top podcast for etc. You can also search on LinkedIn or Instagram or your social media outlets, podcasts about fashion or fashion podcast, whatever it may be. I encourage you, do as much heavy lifting as you can and as much work as you can to get those intimate names. And then yeah, so I guess the answer to that is really anywhere, any of those places you can do that search. If you're new to pitching, what would be your strategy for who we pitch to first versus land, and why and how? A lot of that depends on how much time you have available to pitching. If you don't have much time, then I would go towards your micro influencers. They are frequently the easiest to land, as well as they do pack a heavier punch than you would think. But if this is a really high value for you, I would honestly, I would create a system of let's pitch to maybe 3 name brand outlets, 5 mid-tier, and 10 smaller outlets. So give some stretch so that you can find publicity in multiple places. But really what you want to look at and think about is, where are your target audience most likely? And so give the highest value to where you know your target audience is. So like if you are, we'll say business, if you are a business consultant and you specialize with consulting HR professionals, then I would suggest you pitch to an HR blogger, an HR podcast, or an HR conference over pitching to Forbes if you are limited on your amount of time, because Forbes is a much wider net. So if you want to be really strategic and specific, go, and if you're looking for ROI and sales, go to those smaller outlets. Now, if you're wanting some brand credibility, then go to those larger outlets if that's a higher concern. So it kind of depends on what your goals are. How do we pitch if we're new without being salesy? We have a whole section on that, so we will get to that in just a minute. All right. Actually, we're going to get to it right now, I believe. So let's talk briefly about reaching out. So again, so first thing, once you have your list of places that you want to reach out to, the first thing we're going to do is do our market research to find out who the decision maker is. On some of the platforms, it's going to be obvious. It's usually the person running the platform. And often those smaller platforms even have super easy forms on how to be a guest blogger or how to be a guest on their podcast. But on larger platforms, you need to do some research on what is the submittal process for, like a Forbes or a Yahoo News or whatever it is. If it's a larger organization that's not quite as big, they don't have a formal process, you need to be thinking about, okay, who is in charge of the content for their website or their podcast, and doing that extra level of research to figure out who the decision maker is and what their process is for pitching for PR, particularly news outlets and local news outlets. Doing some light research to know who to pitch for. So if you're pitching the business section of your local newspaper, making sure that you're sending it to the business journalist and not the person that's in charge of crime. Next, once you have who you're going to reach out to, if there is not a formal process to submit a pitch, you will use software to find their emails. So a few of those softwares are Rocket Reach, Hunter.io, and Voila Norbert. So those are all platforms that you can get or scrape people's emails from online. And when in doubt, you can reach out over LinkedIn or Instagram, depending on where that person is most active. LinkedIn and Instagram can actually be very, they convert very highly. People are pretty used to getting Instagram DMs. They're pretty used to getting LinkedIn messages. So don't be afraid to reach out to them there. And then also don't be afraid to follow up. So I actually pitched a relatively large blog back, oh gosh, a couple years ago, I guess. It was pretty big following, really well funded, and I didn't hear anything back. And I ended up reaching back out a couple of times, and after I had reached out, I think the third time I finally got a response and ended up being able to work with this particular platform, which was a DIY home blog. So don't be afraid to follow up. Don't be super annoying. Don't message them every other day, but follow up once, follow up maybe a week later, then go to 2 weeks and then a month. And then at that point, I would say, hey, if you want to reach out once a year, then shoot for the stars. But we want to make sure we're not totally invading their space. The dreaded, please take me off your list email. So make sure you're being kind and considerate, and that those emails are, don't be afraid to follow up. But again, let's just be human about it. Okay, so we'll take a couple more questions if we have any in the chat. And I'm not seeing any. Oops. All right. So we'll keep going. And guys, you can also ask questions as I'm speaking. I will just wait until I have a pause moment to read through that chat, but you can go ahead and put your questions there. Okay, so let's talk about pitching like a human, or in other words, how do we pitch without being salesy, per Joan's question. So first off, we're going to craft our pitch. Now, please do not send canned emails. They are just next to worthless. It is, people can smell it a mile away, especially now, especially people who are constantly getting canned emails. You have to understand that these people with platforms and reach, you are not the only person reaching out to them. The more canned and the less genuine it sounds, the more likely they're just going to trash it and move on. So use a flexible template that can be personalized from reach out to reach out. We're going to go through that template on this next slide. But using a flexible template allows you to put in those key points that make things very specific for their particular brand. And so that doesn't look like just editing the business name in the email. I'm talking, let's put some personalized things, just 1 or 2 sentences that lets the reader know that you have actually visited their website, you have actually thought about their audience, and you've given it deep consideration. It's going to make them feel like you actually care about their platform and that you're not just trying to use them. So be personal. Connection above selling is what I say. So again, we're looking for those connection points like, man, gosh, I am such a big fan of your blog. I've been reading it. Or man, even as something as simple as, I just read your blog. Here's this blog title. Like, I loved the point you made about blah, blah, blah. Hey, I have this thing going on that, I think your audience would like as well. Like, if you're interested, like, I'd love to do a guest blog post on, here's my topic, right? How much better does that sound than a canned email that doesn't address them at all, that says like, dear reader, or dear business name, have you ever thought of connecting with your customers around blah, right? Giving them those short connection points can really go a long way in securing those leads. And then lastly, include your media kit or press release if applicable. So we'll go over briefly what a media kit is and when you should include it and when you shouldn't in just a minute. But you just want to make sure if either of those are applicable, that you include them in your pitch. Okay, so here is a pitch template. First thing we want to start is with a personalized intro specific to the individual you're pitching to. So this is the most important. It must catch their attention. So that's what I was saying, like, oh, I just read your blog. I love your thoughts on this. Or maybe it's a brand you've been a fan of for a long time. Like, I am your biggest fan. Like, you have no clue. I listen to you every Tuesday, whatever it may be. Make sure it's specific to them. Make sure it's heard and understood that you've actually done your research, that you actually care about their platform. Next, going from there, after you have basically given them a short ego stroke, you're going to tell them why you're reaching out. So, hey, love what you're doing, super fan. Oh my gosh, you were groundbreaking. Coat them in some sugar and then say, hey, I'm reaching out because I am trying to bring new wines to the US market. And I really think that your listeners or your readers would be super interested in the fact that there are more than your 10 staple wines that everyone knows about. And I think it would be really cool if we could, do this. Maybe it's a YouTube. So we do a YouTube with you and you're tasting the wine and giving live feedback, right? So paint a picture for them, tell them what you're envisioning, tuck in your credentials if you have any. So what that means is if you have been mentioned on Forbes, if you are, for the wine, if you are like trained somewhere, or if you if your shop is like the #1 sugar confection shop in the East Bay, whatever that looks like, plugging that information in and linking to it when possible. Also, that can look like not only credentials, but if there's like any lists you're on from other blogs, like #1 chocolate shop in the Bay Area, like linking to that so that they can see that you're not just claiming that. If there's a statistic that you want to, like we're working on some PR for the city of Reading, and we're looking at Reading pitching to potential blogs that Reading is now the #1. We have the most number of businesses accepting Bitcoin per capita in the country. And so we need to link to those statistics. So statistics are credentials to backing up the story that we're trying to tell in any way we can. And then next, we're going to want to make sure to let them know what you're attaching. So if you are attaching your media kit, if you are attaching your press release, let them know to look. So, hey, I'm going to attach XYZ. And then you're going to finish with a call to action. Specifically, I'd love to set up a time to chat. I'd love to hop on a call. I'd love to, whatever that might be. I'd love to know your process for submitting a guest blog. Whatever your call to action might be, something that's appropriate for that particular outlet. And if you are setting up a call to chat, give them a couple options. So that's a sales move. I think about as old as time is to not give them open-ended. Don't send them your calendar invite. Just say, what does Friday at noon or Monday at 2 look like for you? You're way more likely to lock in a date or have them engage with that. All right, we're going to pause briefly for questions. Based on your experience, what are some goals and objectives you can set for ourselves to measure our success? I mean, success in this is super black and white. Two things you want to look at. One, are you actually, based on your, I measure things in time. You have to decide your own KPIs and what is of actual value to you. For me, my time is valuable and getting an ROI on that time. So looking at, okay, one, how much time am I spending pitching to people? 2 KPIs off of that are, one, how many platforms am I actually landing? It's a great thing. Like for every hour I land 5 blog posts, but that also means nothing except for new metrics if you are not also turning that into whatever your end goal is. For most people, their end goal is sales. Maybe for you, it's brand awareness or impressions. That can certainly be a thing. So in that case, just being on those can be a good measurement, but I like to push everything to ROI and sales. So how much time am I spending? How many of the platforms that I am actually on, how much money am I making across the board? So if I'm spending 100 hours on pitching for publicity and I'm for pitching for people, and maybe I'm on 100 blog posts, so that's, great, but I'm making $0. If my time per hour is worth $100 an hour, then I can't do math that fast. What is that, 100 grand? What's 100 times 100? I don't know. Anyways, 10,000? I don't know. I can't do math that fast in my head. But you get the point. You don't want to be spending all of this time like just for your own vanity if nothing is turning into sales, if you're not actually getting anywhere else outside of this, outside of just media for media's sake. And there are a lot of people who have media for media's sake out there. A lot of your Instagram influencers. For example, we used to live in Nashville. A handful of our friends were pretty large following Instagram influencers, and none of them had money. So, you can have influence for influence's sake. We want to really, as businesses, try to get influence and reach that actually turns into cold hard cash so that we can keep doing business. Let's see, I'm in the career coaching space for women. Would I include would I just include my contact information? So Joan, that depends on a couple of things. One, we'll go through a media kit. If you have the details, if you're just getting started out, you probably won't have a media kit. Media kit is really to highlight your own personal reach. And you might have a press release depending on where you're releasing out. So definitely include your contact information, but you're emailing them or you're LinkedIning them. So they already have a way to contact you. Let's see, how to ask for media to interview you. By emailing, yes. Emailing, LinkedIn, or Instagram are the places that I suggest. So again, if this is being recorded, so if you just go back and watch, I'm not sure if that was asked before, because I actually went to the host instead of me. So we might have hit that question, but we did go over how exactly to reach out to them. So you can review that once the recording is sent in a few days. Are you ever concerned about those you're pitching to recrafting your content? If so, what are your suggestions to prevent that? Okay, so this, how do I say this? You're not giving away your bread and butter. I get this question a lot because I work with a lot of people who have patentable ideas, which is like, you know, way more protectable. But you're not giving them your blog. You aren't attaching your blog to that email. You are only giving them your idea of how you can partner with the blog. If they go and write the same blog, oh well, you haven't written the blog for them. You haven't done that work. Honestly, the things we're going to be pitching, it's not that creative. You're not giving them Coca-Cola's formula. It's a blog that maybe they've written 5 others for similar things. What you're actually selling them in a lot of these places is they need content. And so you're selling them, hey, let me write a little content. Here's my idea. If I were to write your content for you this week, this is what I would do for the content. And genuinely, like, that is less time they have to spend. If it is something that they vibe with, that they can believe in and get behind, the chances of them recrafting their content, it's just time they're going to have to use. And if they're not passionate about it, I mean, just don't give them the full bread and butter, but like, you have a unique perspective and a unique thing you're bringing to the table. And so, you know, pitch, hey, here's what I'm thinking we could talk about, only the topic, and go on from there. And they can decide if they want to engage further, but it's more often than not, particularly in the business space, we're going to be regurgitating a lot of the same ideas. So it's selling why you are the best fit for their audience and why you have something different to say and a different perspective. All right, so let's get moving to media kits. So today we are just going to be focusing on one-page media kits. Since this is an intro level, I'm going to assume that you are not a large musical artist with tons and tons of media and all kinds of, you know, different things. But let's talk about the things we should include. What we want are simple snapshots of the standout information. What I mean by that is anything that makes you look impressive. Here's an example of a media kit we want to feature. So she has an impressive Instagram following. We're putting that right here. 60K impressions per week, average likes, her web traffic, monthly views. We are putting the most impressive information about her right up in front and personal, so that it's most visible. What these do is they help give you credibility, and it helps the reviewer see what your viewership might be to help them get exposure as well. So here's the deal. Media is a two-way street, which is why we're going to talk about reverse publicity here at the end. It's a two-way street, meaning that if you are featured on someone's blog, they are assuming that you are probably going to share that or potentially share that to some of your outlets, and your followers might end up on their places, right? On their accounts, on their blogs, on their podcasts, whatever it is, because they love you. And so when they see, wow, she has a big following already, this is why like The Bachelor and Bachelorette, like all of them are already Instagram influencers at this point, because they are looking at, well, who already has a following that is going to give us automatic viewership because they're already engaged with this person. So if you have any of those bragging rights, it just helps them know, okay, wow, their website gets a lot of traffic. If they link back to me, then that helps with my viewership. It also helps with their SEO. So some of that can help bridge that gap and give you credibility. If you do not have any noteworthy credentials or traffic, which a lot of people don't when you're first getting started out, then do not include a media pitch with your pitch. Lean on your pitch itself, lean on your ideas, lean on your personality and the fact that you care. And you're still going to be able to find some places to promote yourself. But so just exclude it if you don't have your credentials. And then designing it out, having someone design it like this, it's going to help you stand out. It's visual. It helps them be able to find, exactly what they're looking for. And, some people are going to be sending them their media kits in really sad documents. And so this just, again, it's about credibility. It's about your brand presence. And it really helps you stand out above the rest. It makes them want to engage with it. Like, I want to read this because it's visually appealing. All right, so here's some things that your media kit should include. We want to make sure you're including a short bio. This is super helpful as well. A lot of these platforms will include a short bio. If they're podcasts, will include it in the show description. Blogs might include a short bio after the blog. News outlets the same. And so making your bio easily available to them is super helpful for them. You'll want to include your contact information on your media kit, links to your websites and social media accounts, website traffic. Again, we're not including this if we don't have website traffic. Relevant social media analytics. Again, if those are sad, if you get 2 likes and you only have 10 followers, ditch this. Any outstanding credentials. So if you are trained somewhere special, if you have ever won any awards, if you've ever been featured anywhere, that's name brand, make sure to include those there. If you've ever any amount of features or anything you can brag about. Even if you're I don't know, an e-commerce store that's doing $1 million in sales, even saying I do $1 million in sales for an e-commerce store can be, a credential that you would want to include, just to show that if I'm speaking to other e-commerce stores, or really even just pitching my product, that you are you have clout in the space. Also links to previous features, especially, again, any impressive ones. This helps people get, particularly blogs and podcasts, get an understanding of what your writing style is or what your speaking style is, so that they can make decisions on whether or not they want to have you on their platform. And then if you have been featured in well-known places, you're going to want to make sure you feature those logos, just as I did at the beginning of this webinar. Oh my gosh. Put those logos in, make it super fast. Don't put it in text because they're not going to read it. You want them to visually see, wow, she's been associated with Forbes, or he's been on Fox News, whatever it is, CBN, or I can't think of any outlets right now that have name brands, but you get the idea. All right, any questions thus far? What are best practices in creating a bio? I am not a copywriter, so I unfortunately am not the best person to ask about a bio. But you do want to, anything you can include credentials wise, anything that stand out, but give them a glimpse into who you are and what your personality is. How to ask from media to interview you by emailing. Yeah, so I think that's the same question that I answered before. Again, we did have a section on this, so you will receive a recording so you can review, but emailing, LinkedIn, Facebook messaging, Instagram messaging, all viable options. But there's a whole section and a place that you can actually scrape the information. And if they have a formal way of accepting media queries on their website, then you just want to go through that. Don't email them and bother them if they already have a form set up on their website. Great. Any other questions for now? If not, we will keep going. All right. So when to send a press release. So for the purposes of this course, we're going to be talking about local press releases rather than national campaigns. National campaigns are a much bigger deal, but it's going to be a lot similar, honestly. You're going to be asking the same questions. Your press release is going to look the same, but from a strategy standpoint, thinking about more localized stuff. So one, is it newsworthy? That's the first question you want to ask yourself. Press releases are something that is newsworthy. So if what you are trying to share is, I want to share about best practices in HR, that's not necessarily newsworthy. Let's give it an edge. Now, that's something that's appropriate for a blog or a podcast, but it's not something we're going to write a press release about, right? So some ideas for newsworthy things: you have a new store opening, you have a new product launch, you have a local event, you have a humanitarian effort, you've won an award, major news such as a merger. Like I mentioned before, with Reading having the most businesses per capita that accepts Bitcoin, that is newsworthy. That's a very exciting brag. So those are the kind of things that you're going to pre-write a press release and send off with your information. Now, press releases are going to be expected and helpful for your local news outlets, as well to local magazines. Sorry, that sentence isn't finished. You are going to make sure that you are sending it only to relevant people, which we touched on before. So otherwise, don't send an announcement to your new store opening to the journalist in charge of the sports column. You want to send that to the journalist in charge of the business column. So look at other openings, business openings in the particular news outlet that you are looking at. See who wrote those articles on those store openings, and you're going to want to reach out to that person. So whether that's finding their email or if there is already a place on the website for you to put that kind of information. And then you will send your local press release to local e-newsletters. We do this a lot in business. So like if you're a member of your chamber, send your press release. We're just going to use new store opening as an example for this. So I would send that new store opening to my local chamber of commerce. If my store is in we'll use wine again. Sorry, it's just such an easy example. If it's in the wine space and my new wine shop is opening, I might send that to any newsletters related to food and drinks in the area. Like Reading, for instance, has the Reading Restaurant Reviews. And actually, I don't think they have a newsletter, but if they did, we would want to make sure to send it to that newsletter. So thinking about those kind of things. And again, the purpose of this press release, it's newsworthy, it's informing people of something. And so we want to send them basically a pre-written press release, pre-written article that they can edit for their particular outlets, that they don't have to go hunting for the information. Do not send a press release when it is a general pitch to be featured on a blog, podcast, or otherwise. Just send your thoughts, your ideas, again, paint them that picture, but don't send them a press release. Only do this when it's newsworthy and it's going towards a place that expects a press release, such as a proper news outlet. All right. I'm actually going to stop quickly for questions, see if there's anything in the chat. All right, I'm not seeing anything, so I will continue on. So what's included in a press release? First off, press releases are written like news articles. So you don't have to show your personality here. You don't have to feel connective. You don't have to feel friendly or warm. Write these like a news article. I like flashback to college when I think about writing press releases. It's very start with your catchy headline. That's the next point. Start with your catchy headline, go into a strong lead, something that hooks them in, that's automatically going to make them interested, and include a for immediate release. This is going to tell them this is relevant news. It's happening right now. Go ahead and release this on your platform. And then write it like you would hear a news article. So this is happening. Here's the details. Here's why this matters. Here's some statistics. Don't put too much of yourself into these press releases. We want them to be super formal and relevant and in the same tone that those particular outlets would pitch in. And even for the newsletters, they might adapt those to be a little more warm depending on their brand's tone. But the primary use of these press releases are for news and media outlets. So we want to keep it to that tone. So after you have your catchy headline, your strong lead, your for immediate release statement, we're going to have a press release body. So that's the actual information itself. And then at the bottom of your press release, if there are any statistics, any facts that are shared, you need to include your sources. Your journalists are going to, so say if you're dropping a statistic, Reading has the most businesses per capita, I have to link them over to where I'm getting those statistics and what my sources are so that they can check their validity for their newspaper, because they're not going to run something with statistics or sources that aren't easily verified. And then lastly, you'll just include your company description and your contact information. If they, a lot of the time, these journalists will follow up if they choose to run the story and make some changes. So you want to make sure that it's super easy for them to contact you with any questions they may have. All right, stop briefly for questions. I'm not seeing any in the messenger. All right. All right, so then I am going to keep on moving then. All right, so we are to the last topic of today. And this is, I call it reverse publicity. That's not a real name. That's just what I call it. I don't know that there is a real name for this. It's probably just called publicity. It's just, you know, to differentiate it, I call it reverse publicity. So what is reverse publicity? Well, right there, it's a made-up term. But it's creating a space to feature experts in the field in order to get their audiences onto your website and familiar with your brand or your podcast or your, you know, whatever it may be. But again, it's setting up your own platform that you control the content of and you create the content for to have people and be able to invite people in. So you leverage it by creating a blog for guest features. You might do a podcast with guest interviews. You might for social media takeovers and features on your social media platforms. You might create a social media group and have guest speakers in your social media group. Or you might host online events like the online summits and invite influencers within your space to speak. So you are going to want to reach out if you do this and you set up your own space. And again, the purpose is to have them on. Then we ask them, hey, will you share on your website that you're featured here? Will you share on your social media and let your followers know to come listen to this podcast, right? And so what we're doing is we're engaging their existing audience and bringing them over to our platform. So reach out to experts and influencers that are in your target audience already engages with and they already trust. You're going to want to always follow up. Same deal here. If you ask again. I like to follow like initial email 1 week later, 2 weeks later, a month later. And then I drop off after a month. Usually people are eager to share. First off, think about this. You're pitching people, right? If you go and offer a space, it offers them further credibility and it strokes their ego. It makes them feel good that you took the time to ask them to be on your podcast. So again, this is something like shoot for the stars. You don't know who's going to say yes to you. It feels good to be asked. And even no's are often really kind no's when you are offering to give someone a space to speak, because it feels good. It feels really good for someone to validate that you have something to say. When you reach out, you're going to include the pitch just as before, but it's going to be reversed, right? So you're including why you think they'd be the perfect fit to come and talk to your audience, what you love about them, what you would love for them to share on. You're going to create clear expectations for them as well. So I suggest not to require this. Some people like want to go straight into contract mode and like, let's write a contract and you have to post if you're going to be a guest blogger, you have to post on your social media. No. That is often a turnoff, particularly in the people who are worth your time to interview and whose audiences are engaged. They're not going to love that. But cutting really clear expectations for them, and that can be as simple and as kind as, hey, I created this graphic. Like, I would love it if you had a chance to share this to your Instagram stories today, or to share this on your LinkedIn today, or to, hey, I have this email going out. Like, if you would like to share it with your newsletter, that'd be really cool. I would love it if you would feature this podcast that you're going to be on soon. So we're telling them, hey, we have some expectation that we really, really would hope that you would post this. But we're not forcing them to, we're not requiring it. And 99% of the time, if you put that out and you create the content for them, so you're creating the graphic for social media, for their stories in particular, they're 99% of the time going to take that, plug it in. It's super easy for them. And again, it gives them more credibility. So why wouldn't they? It makes them look fancy when they're featured somewhere else. And so yeah, but create as much as you can for them so that they can easily share, and you're going to have a higher success rate of them sharing to their audiences and driving their traffic. Even if they don't, it's not a big deal. You will still have people organically finding you who love that person, who are searching podcasts for that person, and they're going to end up on your podcast, or maybe they're searching for them online and they wind up on your blog, or maybe they are just on your website because they're in your target audience and then they see that you've interviewed someone they really trust. It's still super helpful for you. All right, we'll pause real quick for questions again. All right. Still not seeing any questions in the chat. So if we have no questions, we are going to start to wrap up. So if you think of anything, we're going to be wrapping up here over the next few minutes, and start putting down your questions now if there's any unanswered questions. And we will just take a moment to do some Q&A after this wrap up. I will be here for a little bit longer to answer any other questions that might pipe up. All right, so here is what we've covered. First off, why you should pitch for Publicity. One, we're going over where you should pitch for Publicity. We're pitching where your target audience already is. So we're going to meet them where they are. We're going to try to get in front of them with places that are already have their attention. They've already caught their trust. So we're pitching to blogs, podcasts, magazines, news outlets, Facebook and LinkedIn groups. If you want to do public speaking, you can also pitch to conferences. or even associations will sometimes have people come and speak publicly. The next thing we went over is how to pitch like a human. So the bold red, do not use canned emails, be personal, include your media kit or press release when applicable. Again, with the media kits, if you don't have anything that makes you look super impressive, ditch it. Do not send over a sad media kit. Just rely on your email body, showering them with compliments, giving them a really great content idea, and lean heavily on that. Press release, again, is only applicable for the newsworthy things, the announcements, sending to news outlets and local newsletters. Or there's, even if we're talking national, there's a lot of national newsletters that are specific for announcements and things like that. So you might consider pitching there as well. And then always follow up. Do not be afraid to follow up. People sometimes just don't see the email. They think about it. They're busy. Then they see it again. They're like, oh yeah, I've been meaning to follow up. Lastly, we talked about reverse publicity. So creating spaces where you can feature experts of your target audience that they already listened to. We're going to use that to leverage the audience of their existing audiences to increase your own brand awareness and drive web traffic to your website or your podcast or whatever it may be. And we're going to be really clear with our expectations. We're going to make sure they know that we would love for them to post on their social media, and we're going to give them the tools to do that. And we're going to follow up. We're going to follow up just as we followed up before with anyone that we want to see on our platform, particularly the people who are more name brand. Don't be afraid to follow up with them. They're very busy. They get a lot of requests. Following up, being genuine, speaking specific to them is going to give you that edge. It's going to look different from all the other emails that are flooding into their inbox. All right, so with that, we are going to open up the floor to questions. Okay, let's see. I saw a lot more have come in. So first off, if you will look in the chat, there's a chat from Linda to everyone that this webinar, we really want to hear your feedback. We want to hear your feedback on this webinar. This is actually how we get funding to put on these webinars that are no cost to you. So it's super important that we know how it was. Should we do this webinar again for other people who need this information? Is there anything you would change? And then what else do you want to hear? Because we genuinely read these, we take time, we process through these, and we actually, this webinar was crafted from responses from other webinars that said that they wanted more information on pitching. And so we listened to those and we put those webinars out based on your feedback. So again, that link is in the chat. Linda has sent it. So if you guys wouldn't mind taking time to fill that out, it is super, super helpful for us. All right, so I'm going to go through some of these questions. Many Facebook groups in the career specs don't allow pitching, asking general questions, market research. How do we get around that on Facebook? You have to adhere to your group rules. However, one, they always allow for you to propose to ask for guest features. So if you create a space, those can be utilized easily for finding experts in the field who want to pitch and tapping into their audiences. It's a great way to connect with people like that. Another way you connect with people authentically. So if there's someone you see showing up in those groups, engage with them in those groups, eventually move it to DMs, and be personable. We are not trying to sell them on anything. That is so rude in publicity. If we're just trying to use them as a means to an end, they smell it from a mile away. It does not feel good when someone wants to use what you have worked really hard to build. So take that with care. And And we're not pitching in those groups to actually say, hey, I want to be on a podcast. We're using those groups to find people who are looking for people to be on a podcast. So other people are going to be posting, hey, I'm looking for someone who can speak to this, and you're going to respond to those. So I spend a little bit of time, particularly in business groups. People are constantly asking for podcast features and for people to, not for themselves, but for people to come on their platforms. So those are almost always permissible in those groups. I've never heard of people not being able to ask for people to be on their platforms because you're asking for help in that sense. And then you're allowed to, at that point, respond to those and say, hey, I would love to be considered for this. But using it as a way to connect with anyone that you see viable. What are your thoughts on electronic/automated systems that allow you seeing press releases to niche or regional outlets? Totally fine with automation for press releases. Totally fine with that. Press releases are way less formal, and they are looking at, is this newsworthy? Is it something that's going to make a headline? And that's what they care about. So you don't have to have as much care and as love as you do with people's personal platforms that they have spent a lot of time and a lot of care into building. Let's see. Can you give a personal example of a pitch that caught your attention and why it did? Gosh, I can't even, it's not really an interesting one. We have a startup resource list that we sometimes have people pitch for us to include in our on our website. Most of them suck. I don't have a very specific example. Again, most of them you can tell they're just trying to use any amount of clout. Oh gosh, I can tell you a really bad example of an in-person person who wanted our organization to help him basically make connections in the community. And my gosh, I have never, it was just so obvious that he was trying to use us to the point that he was not listening to me. He kept asking for my boss's name or to be connected to my boss. And I technically have a boss in that I have someone who can fire me, but we're a flat organization. And then the particular startup center, which is what I'm the director of marketing and startup success. So I work with Startup Reading, and I'm in charge of our PR around startup. I'm in charge of our local startups and helping them. And so he kept asking for my boss's name, and there's in the startup world, there's no one above me in our organization. And so I kept saying, oh no, I'm actually the person you want to talk to. And so he continued to pitch me, continued to ask me to send it over to the guys. And it was very, very apparent that he was not listening to me, that he did not care about me. He did not care. He just wanted to use the clout and the credibility that we had built. And so that's what we're trying to avoid, because I get a lot of that. I get a lot of people just wanting to use our traffic and use our credibility. And so I will bend over and die for anyone and care for anyone if they care for us and they genuinely treat what we've built with respect. So when it catches my eye is when people actually take the time to say, hey, I read this, and in the event of our resource, we had a guy reach out that he was like, hey, in your financial section, I noticed that you don't have anything, any tools for how to best split equity and how investors, sorry, it's a little convoluted, but how investors, how equity caps shrink basically when investors come in, how the investor, I can't think of the word, shrinks the liquidity pool and how that affects the founders' equity. We noticed you didn't have any tools on that particular section. And I love this tool about, like the tools you have are really great. But we have this tool and we noticed that you didn't have anything that, feature this. So would you be interested in featuring this on your website? Like, we'd love to talk about how bringing on an equity investor affects your founder's equity shares. But they showed that it wasn't just a blanket, like, here's this thing, put it on your website. It was like, I've actually read this page. I've actually thought about this. I've noticed that you physically don't have it. It's not, would you consider including it? So that's those are the things that really stand out, is when you can tell that they've actually spent time with your platform. They've spent time considering your target audience, because again, someone has painstakingly built their platforms. Someone has attracted that audience. They have allowed the audience to trust them, and people are protective of their audiences. They do not want to put something out there that is going to lose them any clout with their audience. They're happy to work with people, but the fastest way in is for you to show respect for what they've built. And you can do that by paying attention and not coming off like, I just need something from you, give me this thing. Listen to them, engage with them, be their friend, and you will go really, really far. All right, are there any other questions? Oh, here we go. Can we have the pages sent to an email specific to the topic, publicity, today's talk? I missed the first hour due to some tech glitches. Yeah, so this is actually being recorded, not required. It's being recorded, so you're gonna get the recording, you're gonna get the slides, and you're going to get a worksheet that I briefly touched on at the beginning. Let's see. Solid links that I can help with SolveWorks. We can I'm not sure. I could ask if I could get a cheat sheet on good links that can help us with self-work, self-launch mini shots at Publicity, for what we like to support a cause for, or certain things like civil liberties being infringed upon. How can we bring more public notice to more unique situations that aren't being talked about? So you're going to have to do, for this particular thing, and we went over this at the beginning, so you'll get the recording again. You need to do research for your target audience, for the people who are talking about these things. So there's no fast list that I can say, hey, here's some people you can try to pitch. It is very, very specific to what you are trying to speak on, even infringement of civil liberties and issues surrounding personal family rights infringed upon. That line right there, issues surrounding personal family rights infringed upon. That sounds super niche. I guarantee you there are podcasts and blogs out there that want to hear your what you have to say, but that's going to take research to say, okay, who is willing to talk about these things? Maybe it's someone who has broached other topics that hasn't hit this particular topic. That's going to be a really easy PR sell. If they have consistently in this in the past been talking about the Black civil liberties, the LGBTQIA civil liberties. If you've seen those places talk about those things and you have a unique perspective on personal family rights being infringed on, whatever it is, and even if they've talked about it before, a lot of them will welcome a new fresh perspective, but especially if you haven't seen them hit that particular thing and they have a history of talking about similar things, that's going to be something that's really easy to get in and is going to catch their attention. What kinds of sites for social issues more personalized for family matters, family law? So again, go through the recording. There's a whole worksheet that you can work through to figure out what you can look up for that particular niche. Let's see. Did you focus primarily on PR podcasting for retail commerce? Maybe you can get into a bit on starting links, perhaps baby steps on how to research this. Yep, so that's all in the first thing. Any triggering words? I don't know of anything in that particular space. I am in the startup space, and so I'm tech. But I know that there's places out there, even though you are not looking for, yes, it will be sent after. It's normally, it's normally a couple days. It takes us a couple days to get this recording. Yeah, so I'm actually not in charge of sending out the recording. It's going to be our home office, and it normally takes Emily. It'll probably be early next week before that comes in. And it goes through baby steps on how to research these things, and there is a worksheet that she will be sending as well. Nope, the worksheet will also be next week as well. All right, do we have any other questions that we want to hit before we wrap up? If not, I will let you guys go a little early.
Megan,
Yes.
can you touch on what people can do if they're located in Shasta or Trinity counties, if they want to meet with you or an advisor when they're here as a local business?
Yes, yes. So I'll hit that when I end this webinar. We have a couple of more questions coming in the chat now. So we'll go through how you can work with us and everything on my very last slide, as well as what resources are available in your local spaces. So Elena, this won't be edited at all. So I have answered all of the questions live. That's all going to be in the recording. Eleanor says, can you summarize the areas to hit for publicity? Was it social media, blogs, podcasts? Yes, so you will get that the worksheet, which has all the areas, but blogs, news and media outlets, which are separate from blogs because they are more in the PR press release place, podcasts, those are the big ones. You can pitch to be included on people's social medias. That's typically lands more in product-based businesses and is more on influencer realms, but the pitches look a lot the same. Hey, would you want to feature my thing? It's just on your social media. It's just normally those, particularly for product-based businesses, there might be some cost associated with that, either giving them a product away for free or giving them some of them require payment. Sorry, that's what I'm getting at. So it's a little bit different, but the pitch is going to sound more or less the same. Elena, we would love for you to fill out that survey as well. You know, with all of your thoughts. That's going to be a place that's going to go back to our lead center. Most of us have families. I know I have small children, so I'm not available for webinars in the evening. Elena's asking if we can schedule our webinars at night, but if you can please use the survey. There's Linda, if you wouldn't mind putting that link again so it's fresh for everyone. Give us your feedback there so that we can take it into consideration for future webinars. All right, so the survey link is there again, and we're going to go ahead and wrap up. So you should be able to start getting your free exposure through blogs, podcasts, social media, even local news and media outlets at this point. So your next steps are this. Go and do your research. If you need some help with that, you have access. If you live in America, you have access to the SBDC. They are all over the country. Depending on where you live is who is going to be serving you. So we are with the Shasta and Trinity counties in California. So if you're in those counties, you can reach out to our center. Emily is going to be the person you talk to. Here's our information right here on how to contact us. You'll email Emily at norcalsbdc.org, or you can reach out through our website, sbdcsc.org. If you are not in Shasta or Trinity counties, we have a website right here. It's americassbdc.org/find-your-SBDC. If you go to that link, you can put in where you're located, and it's going to direct you to your personal SBDC office. Again, these are all over the country, so you definitely have an SBDC office that is over the area you live in, so you can reach out to them directly. What we offer is one free, or I should say no cost to you. It's paid for by your tax money. No cost to you advising. And so you get to work one-on-one with someone, talk specifically about your specific needs with an advisor at your local SBDC. So please take advantage of that. If you need help even thinking about how to research, processing through what outlets you should pitch to, that's something that a local advisor would be able to help you walk through. And without further ado, we will go ahead and wrap up. So thank you guys again for coming. If you have a chance to fill out that survey, again, that helps me as much, it helps us all as much as we possibly can. That survey link again is in the thing. You will get these recording, you will get these slides, and you will get that worksheet here in a few days, likely early next week. So we'll talk soon. All right, bye everyone, have a great day.